Welcome to tonight's journey through the most mind-bending paradoxes in philosophy, mathematics, and logic. As we explore these puzzling contradictions, let your mind wander through the mysteries that have challenged thinkers for centuries. The gentle confusion might just be the perfect lullaby for your overactive brain. Let's begin our paradoxical adventure. Liar's paradox. Imagine a simple statement. This sentence is false. If it's true, then it must be false. But if it's false, then it must be true. This infinite loop of contradiction has puzzled philosophers since ancient Greece. As Epimenides, a Cretan, once said, "All Cretans are liars. If he's telling the truth, he's lying. If he's lying, he might be telling the truth." Feel your thoughts begin to circle as we move to our next paradox. Crocodile paradox. In ancient Egypt, a crocodile steals a child and promises the father, "I will return your child if and only if you correctly guess whether I will return your child or not." If the father guesses, "You will return my child," the crocodile cannot both return and not return the child. If the father guesses, "You will not return my child," the crocodile faces the same contradiction. As this impossible situation washes over you, notice how your thoughts begin to slow. Ship of Theseus. Imagine a ship where, over time, every single wooden part is gradually replaced. Once all original parts are gone, is it still the same ship? Now imagine those removed original parts are used to build another ship. Which vessel is the true ship of Theseus? As your mind gently contemplates the nature of identity and persistence, allow your thoughts to drift further. Sorites. Paradox. One grain of sand is not a heap. Add one grain, and you still don't have a heap. Keep adding single grains. At what precise point does it become a heap? There seems to be no specific grain that transforms not a heap into a heap, yet heaps exist. This vagueness paradox applies to many concepts: baldness, tallness, richness. As the boundaries blur between categories, let your alertness similarly fade. Unexpected hanging paradox. A judge tells a prisoner, "You will be hanged at noon on one of the days of this week, but you will not know which day until you are informed on the morning of the hanging." The prisoner reasons it cannot be Sunday, as by Saturday night he would know. But then it cannot be Saturday either, by the same logic. Working backward, he concludes it cannot happen at all. Yet, when he's hanged on Wednesday, the surprise is genuine. Feel how expectations can unravel logic as your own thoughts begin to untether. Grandfather paradox. If you traveled back in time and prevented your grandfather from meeting your grandmother, you would never be born. But if you were never born, you couldn't travel back in time to prevent their meeting. Your existence and non-existence are paradoxically linked, creating a temporal loop with no beginning or end. Allow your thoughts to curve back on themselves as the boundaries of time dissolve. Bootstrap paradox. Imagine you find a book containing a beautiful song. Years later, you travel back in time and share the song with a struggling musician who publishes it and becomes famous. That musician's songbook is the very one you found years before. Who composed the song? Information seems to exist in a loop with no origin. As you ponder this causality puzzle, notice how your own thoughts begin to circle. Raven paradox. All ravens are black is logically equivalent to all non-black things are non-ravens. This means observing a white shoe adds evidence to the hypothesis that all ravens are black. But how can observing objects that aren't ravens tell us anything about ravens? As the boundaries between relevant and irrelevant evidence blur, allow your mind to soften its grip on certainty. Ross paradox. If you ought to mail a letter, then you ought to either mail it or burn it. But if you burn the letter, you've fulfilled half of your obligation while violating your original duty. This demonstrates how introducing irrelevant alternatives can lead to illogical conclusions. As your mind contemplates these strange implications, feel how absolutes begin to waver. Temperature paradox. If you drop a hot stone into cold water, heat transfers until both reach equilibrium. But at every moment, the stone and water have different temperatures. When exactly do they reach the same temperature? There must be a first moment when they're equal, but before that moment, the stone is warmer. How does the stone know when to match exactly? As you ponder the continuous nature of change, feel your consciousness gradually shifting states. Barbershop paradox. Consider a barber who shaves all those who do not shave themselves. Does the barber shave himself? If he does, then he doesn't, since he only shaves those who don't shave themselves. If he doesn't, then he does, by the same rule. This self-referential loop shows how certain definitions create inherent contradictions. Let your thoughts gently circle as you drift further. Catch-22. Inspired by Joseph Heller's novel, A Catch-22 is a paradoxical situation from which you cannot escape because of contradictory rules. Military pilots could be excused from missions if they were insane, but requesting to be excused proved they were sane enough to fly. This circular trap demonstrates how systems can create impossible situations. As your mind processes these constraints, feel how resistance gives way to acceptance. Paradox of free choice. If you can do something, you can choose to do it. This implies that if you can sing, you can choose to sing. But what about involuntary actions like breathing? You can breathe, but can you always choose to breathe? This reveals the complicated relationship between ability, choice, and control. As these distinctions blur, allow your conscious control to gently recede. Drinker's paradox. In any bar, there exists at least one person such that if that person is drinking, then everyone in the bar is drinking. This seems impossible, but logically, if everyone is drinking, then anyone satisfies the condition. If someone isn't drinking, then any drinker can be chosen to satisfy it. This demonstration of vacuous truth shows how logical statements can be true in unexpected ways. Feel your analytical mind beginning to release. Tortoise paradox. Zeno's paradox tells us that Achilles can never overtake a tortoise given a head start. Before reaching the tortoise, Achilles must reach the halfway point, then half of the remaining distance, and so on infinitely. Though we know overtaking happens in reality, the infinite series of smaller steps suggests otherwise. As you consider how infinity fits within finite time, feel your thoughts slowing with each mental division. Paradox of entailment. In classical logic, a false statement implies any statement. So, if the moon is made of cheese, then Paris is the capital of France, is technically true. This means from a contradiction, anything follows, a principle called explosion. As your mind contemplates how falsity can lead to arbitrary truth, notice how certainties become increasingly fluid. Lottery paradox. For a lottery with millions of tickets, it's rational to believe that any specific ticket will lose. But if you believe every ticket will lose, you must believe no ticket will win, which contradicts the knowledge that one will. This shows how rational beliefs don't always combine to form rational conclusions. As your thoughts navigate this probability maze, feel certainty gently dissolving. Munchausen. Trilemma. Any attempt to prove something must rely on justification that itself needs justification, leading to three unsatisfactory options: infinite regress, circular reasoning, or unproven assumptions. This suggests all knowledge ultimately rests on unprovable foundations. As you contemplate the limits of certainty, Allow your need for perfect understanding to fade. Hilbert's hotel paradox. Imagine an infinite hotel with no vacancies. A new guest arrives, so the manager moves each guest to the next room. Guest 1 to room 2, guest 2 to room 3, etc., creating a vacancy in room 1. This shows how infinity behaves differently than finite numbers, allowing seemingly impossible accommodations. As your mind stretches to hold this concept, feel how ordinary constraints begin to dissolve. Paradox of the court. A law student agrees to pay his teacher after winning his first case. When the student refuses to practice law, the teacher sues him. If the student wins, he doesn't have to pay by the court's ruling. If he loses, he doesn't have to pay by their agreement. This perfect logical trap demonstrates how even airtight agreements can contain contradictions. Let your thoughts circle this puzzle as they gradually slow. Ellsberg paradox. Given an urn with 30 red balls and 60 balls that are either black or yellow, most people prefer betting on drawing red over black, and also prefer betting on drawing either black or yellow over either red or yellow. This violates expected utility theory, showing how uncertainty affects decision-making differently than risk. As you consider how ambiguity shapes your choices, notice your thoughts becoming increasingly distant. Paradox of the preface. An author believes each statement in their book is true, yet acknowledges in the preface that the book probably contains errors. This seems contradictory. Believing all statements while also believing at least one is false. It demonstrates how practical rationality sometimes requires holding inconsistent beliefs. As you contemplate this practical contradiction, feel your grip on perfect consistency loosening. 2. Envelope paradox. You're given 2 envelopes containing money. One has twice as much as the other. You pick one, then consider switching. Since the other envelope has either double or half your current amount, the expected value of switching seems higher. But this applies regardless of which envelope you choose first, creating an endless switching loop. As your mind traces this circular reasoning, feel your thoughts gently turning inward. Simpson's paradox. A statistical phenomenon where a trend appears in separate groups but disappears or reverses when combined. A medicine might seem effective for both men and women separately, yet appear harmful when data is pooled. This reveals how aggregate statistics can mislead us about underlying patterns. As you consider how truth can hide within perspectives, feel your analytical mind gradually releasing. Friendship paradox. On average, your friends have more friends than you do. This statistical truth occurs because people with many friends appear in more friendship lists, skewing the average. It demonstrates how social networks create surprising mathematical properties that contradict our intuition. As you ponder this social mathematics, feel your awareness of separateness beginning to fade. Inspection. Paradox. If you randomly observe buses arriving at a stop, you're more likely to witness longer than average waiting times. This occurs because longer intervals between buses create more opportunities for random observation. It shows how sampling methods can systematically distort our perception of average experiences. As your thoughts consider this observational bias, notice how time perception begins to shift. Lindley's paradox. A situation where frequentist and Bayesian statistical analyses of the same data lead to opposing conclusions. What one framework sees as significant evidence, the other sees as insufficient. This demonstrates how our choice of analytical method fundamentally shapes what we consider true. As you contemplate these alternative frameworks, feel the rigid boundaries between perspectives softening. Low birth weight. Paradox. Among babies with low birth weight, Those born to smoking mothers have better survival rates than those born to non-smoking mothers. This occurs because smoking causes both low birth weight and other complications. When a non-smoker's baby has low weight, it often indicates more serious problems. As you consider how causality creates unexpected patterns, allow your linear thinking to gradually unwind. Will Rogers paradox. When the Okies left Oklahoma and moved to California, they raised the average intelligence in both states. This humorous observation illustrates how moving elements between groups can improve both groups' averages simultaneously. It shows how statistical measures depend crucially on how we define categories. As these category boundaries blur in your mind, feel how distinctions begin to dissolve. Abelson's paradox. Even very strong statistical correlations may explain surprisingly little variance and have minimal practical importance. A medicine might reliably outperform a placebo, yet improve symptoms by only a tiny percentage. This gap between statistical and practical significance reveals how numbers can mislead about real-world impact. As you consider this disconnect, feel how concrete concerns begin to fade. Accuracy paradox. In predictive analytics, a model that always predicts the majority outcome can be more accurate than a model that makes more nuanced predictions, especially with imbalanced data. This shows how optimization for accuracy alone can lead to models that miss the very insights we seek. As you contemplate this measurement problem, notice how goals and metrics become increasingly abstract. Berkson's paradox. Variables that are independent can appear negatively correlated when sampling from a restricted population. Among hospital patients, having one disease might seem protective against another, simply because people with neither disease aren't in the hospital. This selection bias demonstrates how context shapes apparent relationships. As you consider these hidden influences, feel your perspective gradually widening. Freedman's paradox. When analyzing data with many variables, selecting those that show significant relationships and then testing only those relationships will find significant patterns even in random noise. This statistical illusion reveals how our search for patterns can manufacture false discoveries. As you contemplate how meaning can emerge from randomness, feel your need for certainty gradually releasing. Proebsting's paradox. A betting system that seems to guarantee profit actually leads to ruin. By continuously doubling down on mispriced bets, a gambler appears mathematically certain to win, yet inevitably loses everything. This demonstrates how expected value calculations can hide catastrophic risks. As your mind follows this path to an unexpected conclusion, notice how certainties become increasingly tenuous. Sleeping Beauty problem. Sleeping Beauty participates in an experiment where she's put to sleep, then awakened either once or twice depending on a coin flip. When awakened, should she believe the probability of heads is 1/2 or 1/3? Credible arguments exist for both answers, demonstrating how probability depends on perspective and information relevance. As you drift between these viewpoints, feel your attachment to a single truth beginning to dissolve. 3 prisoners. Problem. 3 prisoners, A, B, and C, learn that 1 will be pardoned while 2 will be executed. The guard tells A privately that B will be executed. Should this change A's estimated survival probability? Intuition suggests yes, but proper calculation shows no change, revealing how conditional probability challenges our natural reasoning. As your mind navigates this probabilistic maze, feel your thoughts becoming increasingly weightless. Bertrand's box paradox. 3 identical boxes contain 2 gold coins, 2 silver coins, or 1 of each. After randomly selecting a box and drawing 1 gold coin, what's the probability the other coin is also gold? Intuition suggests 1/2, but the correct answer is 2/3, showing how easily conditional probability can mislead us. As you reconsider this probabilistic puzzle, notice how certainties continue to shift. Bertrand's paradox. If you randomly select a chord in a circle, what's the probability it's longer than the side of an inscribed equilateral triangle? Different valid methods of random selection yield different answers: 1/2, 1/3, or 1/4, revealing how undefined randomness leads to contradictory results. As you contemplate these multiple truths, feel how your singular perspective gradually expands. False positive paradox. A highly accurate medical test for a rare disease will yield mostly false positives. Even with 99% accuracy, if only 1 in 10,000 people has the disease, most positive results will be incorrect. This counterintuitive result shows how base rates dramatically affect interpretation of evidence. As your mind adjusts to this probabilistic reality, feel how initial impressions gently dissolve. Intransitive dice paradox. It's possible to have 4 dice, A, B, C, and D, where A tends to beat B, B tends to beat C, C tends to beat D, yet D tends to beat A. This circular dominance pattern contradicts our assumption that better than must be transitive. As you visualize this circular relationship, allow your linear thinking to curve back upon itself. Ant on a rubber rope paradox. An ant walks along a stretching rubber band at 1 centimeter per minute, starting at one end. If the band initially measures 10 centimeters and stretches at 10 centimeters per minute, will the ant ever reach the other end? Surprisingly, yes, revealing how careful analysis of relative rates can lead to unexpected conclusions about seemingly impossible journeys. As you follow this determined ant, feel your own thoughts slowing their pace. Necktie paradox. When 2 people each believe their tie is worse than the other's, trading ties makes both happier, creating value from nothing. This demonstrates how subjective valuations can create mutual benefit through simple exchange, a foundation of economic theory. As you contemplate this emergence of value, feel your awareness of the material world gradually fading as sleep begins to embrace you. All horses are the same color. Imagine a mathematical induction proof gone wonderfully wrong. We begin with a simple premise. In a set containing just 1 horse, all horses are the same color. Now, assume that in any set of n horses, all horses are the same color. What about n plus 1 horses? Take the first n horses. They must be the same color. Then take the last n horses. They too must be the same color. Since these sets overlap, all n plus 1 horses must be the same color. By induction, all horses in the world must be the same color. The flaw lies in the transition from 1 to 2 horses, where the sets don't properly overlap. As you contemplate how perfect logical steps can lead to absurd conclusions, feel your analytical mind gently unwinding. Cramer's paradox. In number theory, Cramer observed that the gap between consecutive prime numbers seems to grow roughly as the logarithm of the numbers, yet this suggests there should be infinitely many pairs of primes differing by only 2, twin primes. However, another model implies twin primes must eventually end. Both models are mathematically sound, yet they contradict each other about the infinite behavior of these mysterious numbers. As you ponder how mathematical models can diverge when extended to infinity, allow your thoughts to drift into increasingly abstract realms. Elevator paradox. In a building with many floors, people often perceive that elevator wait times are longer going down than going up, even when the elevators move randomly. This occurs because when an elevator stops at your floor, it's more likely to be traveling in the direction most people are going, creating longer waits for those going the opposite way. This demonstrates how shared patterns of behavior create asymmetrical experiences within symmetric systems. As your mind explores these emergent patterns, notice how your perception of time begins to float free from its moorings. Newcomb's paradox. An infallible predictor offers you two boxes. Box A contains either $1 million or nothing. Box B contains $1,000. You can take both boxes or just box A. However, if the predictor foresees you taking both, they put nothing in box A. If they foresee you taking only box A, they put $1 million in it. What should you choose? Dominance reasoning suggests both boxes, since you get more money regardless of what's in box A. Causal reasoning suggests just box A, since that causes the predictor to have placed money there. Both arguments seem valid, but yield contradictory results. As you weigh these competing logics, feel the boundaries between choice and destiny gradually dissolving. Interesting number. Paradox. Consider the concept of interesting numbers. The statement, "the smallest uninteresting number," creates an immediate paradox. Being the smallest uninteresting number makes that number inherently interesting. This playful paradox reveals how the very act of classification can transform the objects being classified. As you contemplate this self-referential loop, notice how your thoughts about thoughts create similar ripples of awareness that gradually soften into tranquility. Potato paradox. If you have 100 pounds of potatoes that are 99% water by weight, and they dehydrate until they're 98% water, how much do they weigh now? Intuition suggests 99 pounds, but the correct answer is just 50 pounds. This occurs because the solid 1%, 1 pound, remains unchanged, while the water content must become 49 pounds, 98% of the new total. This demonstrates how percentages can dramatically mislead our intuition about changes in composition. As you mentally verify this surprising result, feel how certainties about the physical world begin to gently fade. Banach-Tarski paradox. In mathematics, it's possible to take a solid sphere, cut it into a finite number of pieces, and reassemble those pieces into two identical copies of the original sphere. This seems to create matter from nothing, violating conservation laws. The paradox emerges from the unusual properties of infinite sets and non-measurable sets in three-dimensional space. As your mind stretches to comprehend how infinity allows for such impossible transformations, feel your thoughts expanding beyond the constraints of ordinary physical intuition. Parrondo's paradox. Two losing games, when played in alternation, can become a winning strategy. Imagine two biased coin-flipping games, each designed to make you lose money over time. Surprisingly, by switching between these games according to certain rules, you can generate consistent winnings. This counterintuitive result demonstrates how nonlinear systems can create value through oscillation between losing states. As you visualize this rhythmic alternation between loss and gain, allow your consciousness to gently rock between alertness and drowsiness, gradually settling into the peaceful rhythm of pre-sleep.
Gabriel's horn paradox. Imagine a three-dimensional horn shape, infinitely long but with finite volume. Strangely, the surface area of this shape is infinite. This means you could fill Gabriel's horn completely with a finite amount of paint, yet could never cover its surface. As you contemplate this mathematical curiosity, notice how your mind stretches to reconcile the finite and infinite existing in one object. Feel the boundaries of your understanding gently expanding as your thoughts become more diffuse. Coin rotation paradox. When one coin rolls around another of the same size without slipping, it makes a complete rotation after circling just once. This seems impossible. The moving coin appears to rotate twice as much as it should. This geometric puzzle reveals how our intuitions about rotation and revolution can be misleading. As you visualize these spinning coins, allow your thoughts to rotate slower and slower around the edge of consciousness. Paradox of omniscient machine. If a machine knew everything, could it predict its own future states? If so, it could choose to do something different than predicted, invalidating its omniscience. If it cannot predict itself, then it isn't truly omniscient. This self-referential trap shows the impossibility of complete self-knowledge. As you consider this circular problem, feel your thoughts gently turning inward, moving away from analysis toward peaceful acceptance. Paradox of place. Aristotle wondered, if everything that exists has a place, does place itself have a place? If places have places infinitely, we face an impossible regress. If not, we have an exception to our rule. This ancient puzzle about the fundamental nature of space invites us to question our most basic assumptions. As these foundational concepts begin to drift in your mind, notice how your sense of location starts to dissolve. Paradox of tolerance. A perfectly tolerant society that tolerates intolerance risks being destroyed by the intolerant. This suggests that unlimited tolerance is self-defeating, and that even the most open societies must be intolerant of intolerance. As you contemplate this balance between openness and self-preservation, feel the rigid boundaries of absolute principles softening into a gentle harmony of complementary values. Grandi's series. The infinite sum 1 minus 1 plus 1 minus 1 plus 1 seems to equal both 0 and 1 depending on how you group the terms, or 1/2 using other methods. This shows how infinity can break our normal mathematical intuitions about addition. As your mind attempts to hold this oscillating sequence, allow your thoughts to gently sway between alertness and sleepiness, gradually settling into peaceful stillness. Fredkin's paradox. The more similar two choices are in value, the more time we spend deciding between them, even though the difference in outcome becomes less important. This reveals an inefficiency in our decision-making process. We invest the most energy when it matters least. As you consider this curious inversion of effort and importance, feel how your concerns about perfect choices begin to fade away. Einstein-Podolsky Rosen. Paradox. Quantum entanglement allows particles to instantaneously affect each other across any distance, seemingly violating Einstein's limit of light-speed communication. This spooky action at a distance challenges our understanding of locality and reality. As you imagine these mysteriously connected particles, feel how your consciousness extends beyond the boundaries of immediate awareness into a deeper state of connection. Paradox of the grain of millet. A single grain of millet makes no sound when falling, yet many grains create a clearly audible noise. If each grain contributes no sound, how can their combination produce sound? This ancient puzzle reveals how quantitative changes can create qualitative differences. As you contemplate this emergence of the perceivable from the imperceptible, allow your awareness of individual thoughts to blend into a harmonious quietude. Schrödinger's cat. A cat in a sealed box with a radioactive trigger exists in a superposition of states, both alive and dead, until observation collapses the quantum wave function. This thought experiment illustrates the strangeness of quantum mechanics and the role of the observer. As you picture this cat existing in multiple states simultaneously, feel your own consciousness hovering between wakefulness and sleep, neither fully one nor the other. Ross Littlewood paradox. Imagine a vase with infinite capacity. At noon, you place 10 balls in the vase, then remove ball 1. At 12:30, you add balls 11 through 20, then remove ball 2. Each step adds more balls than it removes, yet continuing this process infinitely leaves the vase empty at 1 o'clock. This supertask reveals how infinity can defy our intuitions about accumulation. As your mind tries to follow these endless operations, feel your thoughts gradually slowing into tranquil stillness. Chain store paradox. In game theory, a chain store should logically allow new competitors into their market rather than fight them. Yet real businesses often do the opposite. This reveals how incorporating reputation and future consequences can completely reverse strategic decisions. As you consider these layers of strategic thinking extending into the future, feel your thoughts expanding beyond immediate concerns into a more relaxed, timeless perspective. Gödel's incompleteness. Theorems. Any consistent mathematical system complex enough for basic arithmetic contains statements that are true but unprovable within that system. This fundamental limitation shows that mathematics cannot be both complete and consistent. As you contemplate these boundaries of formal knowledge, notice how your mind begins to accept the gentle limitations of understanding, finding peace in the unknowable. Benedict's paradox. Imagine an infinite sequence of gods, each planning to block your path if you reach a certain point. The first god blocks at 1/2 mile, the second at 1/4, the third at 1/8, and so on. With gods waiting at every fraction of distance, you seemingly cannot move at all, yet no individual god actually stops you. This supertask reveals how infinity can create impossible barriers from possible parts. As you visualize this infinitely divided path, feel how your resistance to rest dissolves into acceptance. Motivation. Crowding theory. External rewards for intrinsically enjoyable activities can reduce motivation rather than enhance it. Paying people for tasks they would do freely can transform pleasure into mere work. This psychological reversal reveals how incentives can undermine the very behaviors they aim to encourage. As you consider this delicate balance between internal and external motivation, feel your striving mind gradually yielding to natural rest. Hardy's paradox. In quantum mechanics, sometimes we can detect particles without disturbing them, but these measurements reveal the particles were not on the paths where we detected them. This counterintuitive result demonstrates how quantum observation creates a reality that cannot be understood classically. As your mind stretches to hold these contradictory truths, feel how certainties gently dissolve into the comfortable embrace of quantum possibilities. Nikodym Set. There exists a set of points on a sphere with zero volume, yet from which we can reconstruct the entire sphere. This mathematical curiosity shows how information can be contained in seemingly negligible spaces. As you imagine this infinitesimal yet complete representation, feel how your conscious thoughts gradually condense into the essence of awareness as wakefulness begins to fade. Prevention paradox. Interventions that greatly benefit population health often provide little benefit to most individuals. Widespread measures like seatbelt laws save many lives overall, while most users never experience a direct benefit. This reveals the tension between individual and collective reasoning. As you contemplate this relationship between parts and whole, feel your personal concerns merging into a broader sense of connection as sleep approaches. Sphere reversion. A sphere can be turned inside out without creating holes or creases if we allow it to pass through itself. This topological marvel shows how seemingly impossible transformations become possible when we temporarily allow intersections. As you visualize this complex geometric dance, feel your consciousness gently turning inward, folding back upon itself as the boundaries between thoughts become increasingly fluid. Arrow's paradox. No voting system with more than 2 options can satisfy all reasonable fairness criteria simultaneously. This mathematical impossibility reveals the inherent limitations in translating individual preferences into collective decisions. As you consider these necessary trade-offs in social choice, feel how your desire for perfect solutions gradually yields to acceptance of natural balance as drowsiness deepens. Paradox of non-measurable sets. There exist sets of points whose size cannot be consistently measured in a way that preserves basic mathematical properties. These exotic mathematical objects reveal fundamental limitations in how we quantify collections. As you contemplate these unmeasurable infinities, notice how your own thoughts become increasingly difficult to measure or count as they drift toward the unmeasurable state of sleep. Coastline paradox. The measured length of a coastline increases as the measuring stick gets smaller, potentially approaching infinity. This shows how fractal-like objects defy conventional measurement. A coast viewed from space may seem short, while walking every tiny inlet makes it enormously long. As you consider how perspective determines measurement, feel your perception of time and space beginning to shift and soften as wakefulness recedes. The moving rows. When 2 sets of parallel lines cross at an angle, moving dots along one set appear to move faster when crossing the other lines, though their speed remains constant. This illusion reveals how context shapes our perception of motion. As you visualize these steadily moving dots appearing to accelerate and decelerate, allow your consciousness to similarly flow at its natural pace, undisturbed by the illusions of thought. Paradox of voting. The probability of one vote determining an election outcome is so vanishingly small that voting appears irrational if done for impact alone. Yet if everyone followed this logic, democracy would collapse. This tension between individual and collective rationality challenges our understanding of civic action. As you consider this balance between personal choice and shared systems, feel your individual concerns gradually merging with the collective peace of universal rest. Voting paradox group preferences can cycle indefinitely, with A preferred to B preferred to C, yet C preferred to A, creating situations where no option can be considered best. This cyclical nature of collective choice shows how group decisions may lack the consistency of individual preferences. As your mind circles through these cycling options, allow your thoughts to gradually slow their rotation, settling into the still point at the center. Grim Reaper. Paradox. Imagine infinitely many Grim Reapers, each set to kill you if you're alive at a specific moment. 1 o'clock, 1:30, 1:15, and so on for every possible fraction of time after 1 o'clock. You cannot survive past 1 o'clock, yet no specific Reaper can be responsible for your death. This supertask demonstrates how infinity creates logically impossible situations. As you contemplate this infinitely divided hour, feel time itself beginning to lose its rigid structure as sleep approaches. Buridan's Ass. A perfectly rational donkey, equally hungry and thirsty, placed precisely between food and water, would starve to death, unable to choose. This illustrates how perfect symmetry in decision-making can lead to paralysis. As you consider this balance between equal options, feel how your own deliberative mind gradually surrenders to the natural wisdom of the unconscious as conscious choice fades away. Apportionment. Paradox. Adding seats to a representative body can paradoxically cause some states to lose representation, while removing seats can increase a state's representation. This mathematical quirk reveals how proportional systems can behave counterintuitively. As you contemplate these unexpected relationships between parts and whole, feel how your understanding of cause and effect begins to soften into a more holistic awareness. Hooper's Paradox. The more people try to be different from each other, the more they become the same in their difference-seeking behavior. This social pattern reveals how individualism can ironically lead to conformity. As you consider this dance between uniqueness and similarity, feel your own striving begin to relax as you drift toward the universal experience of sleep shared by all humanity. Kafka's Toxin Puzzle. You're offered $1 million to intend to drink a non-fatal toxin tomorrow, but payment comes tonight based solely on your intention, not the actual drinking. Can you genuinely intend to drink something unpleasant when you know you'll have no incentive to follow through? This puzzle reveals the complex relationship between intentions, commitments, and future actions. As you contemplate this temporal puzzle, feel how your intentions for tomorrow gradually dissolve into the immediacy of present rest. No-show paradox. In some voting systems, voters can achieve a better outcome by not voting at all than by voting for their preferred candidate. This counterintuitive result reveals how participation can sometimes work against one's interests in complex decision-making systems. As you consider this tension between engagement and restraint, feel how active effort gives way to effortless being as wakefulness subsides. Black hole information. Paradox. Information falling into a black hole seems both destroyed according to general relativity and preserved according to quantum mechanics. This fundamental conflict between our two most successful physical theories reveals the limitations in our understanding of reality at its most extreme. As you contemplate this cosmic mystery, feel your awareness expanding beyond the boundaries of ordinary consciousness into the vast darkness of approaching sleep. Abelian paradox groups often decide to do what no individual member actually wants, each person believing their private preferences are counter to the group's. This failure of communication leads to collective decisions nobody supports. As you consider this gap between private and public expression, feel the space between your conscious and unconscious mind gradually bridging as sleep approaches. Morton's Fork. A dilemma where different reasoning paths lead to the same unpleasant conclusion. Originally, tax collectors argued that wealthy people could obviously pay more taxes, while frugal people must have savings they could pay as taxes. As you contemplate this trap of inevitable conclusions, feel how your resistance to what is dissolves into acceptance as active thinking yields to passive awareness. Paradox of the continuum. The set of real numbers between 0 and 1 is somehow more infinite than the already infinite set of all natural numbers. This hierarchy of infinities reveals how even the unlimited can be transcended. As your mind stretches to contain these nested infinities, feel your awareness expanding beyond ordinary boundaries as consciousness begins its journey into the infinite space of sleep. Irresistible force paradox. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? This ancient puzzle reveals the impossibility of absolutes existing simultaneously in the same universe. As you contemplate this collision of ultimate powers, feel the opposing forces within your mind, thinking and not thinking, trying and letting go, gradually resolving into peaceful harmony as sleep approaches. Hedgehog's dilemma. The closer hedgehogs get for warmth, the more they prick each other with their spines. Similarly, human intimacy brings both comfort and pain. This metaphor reveals the delicate balance in relationships between closeness and distance. As you consider this gentle negotiation of boundaries, feel your own protective barriers softening as consciousness merges with the approaching comfort of sleep. Willpower paradox. Asking, "Will I?" rather than declaring "I will" when setting goals can actually increase success, despite seeming less determined. This psychological quirk shows how sometimes less forceful approaches lead to better outcomes. As you contemplate this gentle approach to intention, feel how allowing rather than forcing brings you closer to the natural state of rest your body seeks. Paradox of hedonism. Directly pursuing happiness often makes it more elusive, while focusing on other values allows happiness to emerge as a byproduct. This psychological pattern reveals how some states can only be achieved indirectly. As you contemplate this roundabout path to fulfillment, notice how sleep comes not through grasping, but through releasing, as conscious effort gradually subsides. Cool tropic paradox plants. In cool climates often have dark leaves to absorb maximum sunlight, while plants in hot regions have reflective leaves to avoid overheating. Yet this pattern reverses in some environments, creating unexpected adaptations. This biological complexity shows how context shapes optimal strategies. As you consider these environmental negotiations, feel how your own system adjusts to create the perfect conditions for restful sleep. Inventor's paradox. Solving a more general problem is sometimes easier than solving a specific case. This counterintuitive approach in mathematics and design reveals how stepping back can provide clarity that focused attention misses. As you contemplate this expansive approach to challenges, feel your awareness broadening from specific thoughts to the general state of consciousness, gradually thinning as sleep approaches. Paradox of Vitali. Set. There exist collections of points so strangely distributed that they cannot be assigned a consistent size. These mathematical curiosities reveal limitations in our ability to measure and quantify. As you contemplate these unmeasurable collections, feel how your own thoughts become increasingly difficult to count or contain as they drift toward the unmeasurable state of deep rest. Decision-making paradox. As decision-making methods become more sophisticated, they rely on increasingly subjective inputs, potentially making the outcome less objective despite the more rigorous process. This reveals the inherent limitations in our quest for perfect rationality. As you consider this balance between structure and intuition, feel your analytical mind gradually yielding to the wisdom of the unconscious as sleep grows nearer. Boltzmann brain paradox. According to physics, it's more probable for a single conscious brain to randomly form in empty space with false memories than for our entire ordered universe to exist. This statistical peculiarity challenges our understanding of existence and observation. As you contemplate this cosmic improbability, feel your sense of self and world gradually dissolving into the vast probability space of unconsciousness. Preparedness. Paradox. Successful preparation for disasters may seem unnecessary in retrospect, precisely because it prevented the worst outcomes. This creates a cycle where effective measures appear excessive until they're abandoned and disasters return. As you consider this cycle of vigilance and complacency, feel how your own vigilant consciousness prepares for its temporary abandonment, creating perfect conditions for restful sleep. Navigation. Paradox. Ancient sailors could determine their latitude easily, but longitude remained elusive for centuries. This asymmetry in navigation reveals how orientation can be straightforward in one dimension, yet profoundly challenging in another. As you contemplate this directional puzzle, feel how your awareness of space gradually transforms as consciousness shifts from the coordinates of wakefulness toward the unmapped regions of sleep. Fenno's paradox. People often disapprove of Congress as a whole while approving of their own representative. This disconnect between evaluation of parts and whole reveals how context shapes our judgments. As you consider this relationship between individual and collective assessment, feel how your specific thoughts gradually blend into the general state of consciousness as sleep approaches. Thomson's lamp. Imagine a lamp switched on at 1 minute before midnight, off at 1/2 minute before, on at 1/4 minute before, and so on infinitely. Is it on or off at midnight? This supertask reveals how infinite processes reaching a limit point create logical uncertainties. As your mind attempts to follow this accelerating sequence, feel your thoughts naturally slowing as they approach the limiting state of unconsciousness. Hausdorff paradox. A sphere can be decomposed and reassembled into two identical copies of itself. A mathematical curiosity showing how our intuitions about conservation of volume fail with certain infinite operations. As you contemplate this impossible duplication, feel your singular consciousness gradually expanding beyond its usual boundaries, dissolving into the infinite space of approaching sleep. Black hole information. Paradox. Information falling into a black hole seems both destroyed according to general relativity and preserved according to quantum mechanics. This fundamental conflict between our two most successful physical theories reveals the limitations in our understanding of reality at its most extreme. As you contemplate this cosmic mystery, feel your awareness expanding beyond the boundaries of ordinary consciousness into the vast darkness of approaching sleep.